have to take off the bumper to access the radiator is because you have these two plastic wind fairings that are held in place by the bumper. Hello friend, this video is going to be how to replace or clean your 5th gen 4Runner radiator. So far, there's no other videos on the internet about this specifically. There's some videos about doing other work that shows a little bit of this, but frustratingly, I couldn't find a specific video about this. I'm guessing because these parts aren't dying yet, but I'm dealing with intermittent overheating. Hot days, idling or very, very low speeds. I realize that my radiator is incredibly dirty. If you want to skip to the work, I have timestamps, so you can go ahead and skip. Maybe I'll say one more thing before I start the work here, which is some of the things you'll need. So if you're cleaning, I think having a shop vac is going to be a necessity. 5-gallon measured container. And then your bumper, yes, your bumper is going to have to go probably on a blanket if you don't want to scratch it up. And then I bought OEM coolant, the 50/50 pink, and then Valvoline Max Life ATF because I already paid a shop to do my last transmission change and they used Valvoline. Then the radiator fill funnel tool, 3/8 inside diameter hose. You're gonna need to take your bumper off, so that's a 10 mil on just a ratchet. Any old ratchet will do fine. And then hand tools, 12 millimeter socket on there for the radiator. Maybe I'll need more tools, but then coil cleaner because I'm gonna be cleaning mine, hopefully not replacing it. I went ahead and bought my replacement and some replacement hoses because if I need to replace, then I'm not gonna wanna have to go get it mid-job, and I can always just return this one. So thermostat, I'm also gonna do the thermostat while I'm in there kind of thing. So those are the tools that I'm gonna be using for the job. Maybe I'll come into finding more tools needed. For as much as we love Toyota for their easy repairs, you do have to take off your bumper cover in order to get to the radiator. It's annoying. You'll see why. I've already tried and finagled with it myself to see if I could just get to it without having to do this. It's really hard, next to impossible, to put it all back together. To get it apart, maybe, but to put it all back together. So start by taking off your bumper cover. Look up a different video for that. This is the reason why you cannot get to your radiator bolts. You're gonna see why, I'll show you. But if you go underneath your 4Runner, and granted, I have more access than most because my 4Runner is cut, so my bumper is cut, so it has no under lip kind of thing. So I could see all the way up here, and even still, basically the crash bar support still is in the way when you're underneath the vehicle. You cannot see up past this. And then you have this wind fairing that guides air to your condenser. And this also made it next to impossible to see where you're trying to access. So the lower bolt here, you see it doesn't move. If I were to move that, you would end up seeing, and I will move it eventually, but you'll see that is where we're going because that is the second radiator bolt. So the first radiator bolt is tucked right in here. You can see the bolt head right there. And that's also visible more behind this wind fairing. But that one, you can actually get to that bolt. You can get to it. But this one is pretty much impossible to get to without taking off this plastic wind fairing. Now, again, I was able to get to this without taking my bumper off. Maybe it's because I have more access. I was able to get to it. I got my hand up in there. I got a 12 mil socket actually on this, but I could not figure out how I was gonna get it back together. And so that right there, it's not visible, but that is your bolt. All right, I'm learning as I go here. I thought that these plastic fairings were held on by a 10 millimeter bolt, but it's not a bolt, it's just these pop sockets right here. All right, so that's number one right here holding, and that's number two, replacing them. So now that these wind fairings move freely, That's more than enough space. I'm not gonna remove it all the way. So there you now have it. That right there is the access to the bolt for the lower radiator. So zooming out, yep, this part of the wind fairing tucks and it clips right in there. And when you pull it out, you have access. Same on this side, nothing from there, but right there. So that is how you get access to it. So if you have an easier way, leave a comment, help somebody else out. But now that I have this done, I am going to drain the radiator. There's other videos that are great for how to drain the radiator, how to drain the block over on the passenger side here. I'll probably take the tire off to make my life easy. But you're gonna drain the radiator, and then I'm gonna try to do this by removing just the fan shroud from the radiator. Ideally, I do not want to have to detach the fan clutch. I've already done that once. So I don't want to have to detach the fan clutch. I don't want to have to take out anything else or do any more removal except the radiator. So before I touch the radiator bolts, maybe even before I drain it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to test if I can just remove this bolt here that attaches the fan shroud. And I'm going to remove this bolt here that attaches the fan shroud. I'm not going to touch the reservoir except to drain it, but I'm not going to touch the reservoir. I'm just going to remove that bolt and the bolt over here, and then I'll show you underneath how it attaches at the bottom. There's no more bolts. This is where the fan shroud sits into. There's basically just a clip kind of thing here, and so I think I'll be able to just lift up and get that out. The transmission lines are connected to the fan shroud, so all the more reason that I'm hoping I don't have to detach the fan shroud and lift that out. I just want to get the radiator out so I can clean the backside of the AC condenser and clean the radiator fins by pulling it out. Interruption to tell you a few other things you might find handy. Some radiator hose like pinch off pliers. I didn't think about the fact that the coolant jug is attached to the radiator, not to the fan shroud. That makes sense. So I'm gonna have to take that out. I'm pausing to tell you that that bolt right down there is a pain to get to because of the low pressure AC line. However, yeah, once you get these two off, this one here and that one, this last bolt, the one tucked in there, is attached to the fan shroud. So you don't have to take the whole thing out if you don't want to. All right, so I'm almost perfectly positive that this is going to come out. No problem here. You can see all the way to the bottom. And you can tell that it's just a clip holding it in down there. I can move it. It's just that the upper hose is in the way. So once I drain this thing and get that off, I just moved the reservoir neck hose. Yeah, once this comes off, I think the fan shroud is just wiggles out of the way, and I'm going to be able to pull the radiator up and out. So now it's for draining. I'm going to make sure that I get my hoses pinched off here. So I'm going to use pinch offs. You're going to need, probably set some sort of your favorite plier to get the hose clamps off. And then, yeah, once I get hose clamps off, drained and everything, and I'm warm right now, so it should be pretty fast. I don't think it'd be a problem anyway. So this is the front of the car. There's your radiator drain, and those are your transmission lines as well. So that's where I pinched off. As I pulled up and I used some picks to kind of loosen up the hoses, I pulled them, plugged them with towel, and then I pinched them off right as soon as I pulled them off. So just be gentle on them so you don't break them. I would make sure you're wearing your glasses so that you don't get fluid in your eyes, but that's up to you. And then I'll show you that once I was able to get this hose off, the lower radiator hose, and there's your transmission line, by the way, and that's pinched off with the towel. You can see it loses a little bit there. But once you're able to do that, then you can move the fan shroud freely. So there's the fan shroud, and it moves, and you can just barely get it past the lower radiator hose inlet so that you could pull that up and out, I think. The cheapo orange picks from Harbor Freight are famous for a reason. Get in there, you gotta break the seal on your hoses. This is how I did the transmission as well. I figured it'd be easier to show here. You get underneath, be gentle, don't pry too hard or pull too hard, but once you get underneath and you go all the way in, you should be able to kind of pull it up, break the seal essentially, and then it comes right off. And you do the same with all the hoses. All right, now that this hose is off, I'm gonna do my 4 bolts and then see if I can't just lift this thing out. Hopefully, again, fan shroud doesn't have to come out too. I wanted to be able to show you that this is your second radiator bolt location. So there's your upper, there's your lower, and that's gonna be a nice picture for the forum. These are all 12 mil bolts, and I think about a 6-inch extension is probably gonna be easiest for these. If you're choosing not to remove this, like I'm not gonna on this side, then again, I still think you should be able to get in here. In order to get this one, I think the best bet is using a long 12 mil and a very short extension, or vice versa, using a little 3-inch extension and a short socket. And you can go in from the top and then actually get this hand underneath here in order to place it on the bolt, find the head of the bolt. So now we're gonna find out how finicky this thing is to try to pull. The transmission line's connected to the back of the fan shroud are looking like they're not gonna give me the clearance that I need here. I'm kind of solving this in real time here. These transmission lines are mounted on the back of the fan shroud right there with a 10 mil bolt. Once you get that 10 mil bolt out of there, you have the flexibility to move the transmission lines just on the other side of the pipe, just one of them on the other side of the AC pipe here. And then while you do that, once you do that, you now have the freedom to wiggle the radiator. And then this is where pulling it back from each of the blockages, kind of every little piece that blocks it from coming up. So I ended up actually laying under it, kind of finagling from the lower side. I was able to see that the lower radiator hose is also kind of making contact with the line. When I moved that out of the way, then I was able to finally kind of push everything up so that all the connections are clear. And then from there, now it's probably just a wiggling this thing out of here, out of the top. And this, I think, is my overheating issue. I could have bought one of these 2 tools. Let me kind of put them on screen here. These 2 tools maybe could have helped me out, but I think mine was too far gone. So you should make this part of your preventative maintenance. Make this a part of your schedule here to clean these out, to brush inside or to blow it out. Do something like that. If light cannot get through this thing, then wind is definitely not getting through this thing. Lots and lots of this thing is completely covered. And there's the backside of my AC condenser. AC condenser is more tolerable in terms of its cleanliness, but it's still pretty bad on the backside here. So that's the side that faces the radiator, and I'm gonna end up cleaning that pretty good as well. All right, a lot of this is stuck in there really bad. So this is the coil cleaner I'm using. Again, I don't have an air compressor. I just have a shop vac that can blow in both directions. The shop vac is not strong enough to press air through this. So I shop vac'd it. I did the best I could. And I think I decided before I rinsed it out, I am gonna go ahead and spray this, even just if that first round helps. Maybe I'll have to do another round, but this coil cleaner is going to be able to sit on there for a few minutes, and hopefully it kind of softens it up, maybe gets things moving just a little bit. We'll see. This is already light years better than it was before, and I'm gonna do a second coat. I did remember, you need to spray from the back towards the front. So wherever the connections are, you need to spray from that side to the other side so that you're not pushing more things through. That was a mistake I almost made. Now I'm gonna go do it on the coil while the AC condenser while this is foaming. And there you can see it's soaking on the AC condenser. So you can see it coming through. The AC condenser was a heck of a lot cleaner somehow than the radiator. All right, I'm gonna let this drain out a little bit, but I wanna show you already what I can see, which is the light is now visible from everywhere on it. Of course, the coils at certain angles make it harder, but I can see my flashlight from everywhere in here now. That is a huge difference from before. So I've cleaned up the radiator, I've cleaned up the AC coils. I'm gonna do my thermostat while I'm in here. Again, there are other videos about this. It is a very easy job. It is 3 bolts right there. So here you have the cleaned radiator. Again, it's worse for wear, 200,000 miles on it, OEM part, but it's clean enough for testing this summer. When the summer rolls around, I'm gonna find out if I need to replace it or not, but I'd rather not throw parts at a problem and find out later that maybe I didn't even need to if it still overheats and it's the cause of something else. Once you get it set in like this, I think if you don't have extra hands, going from underneath and shaking it until the rest of it falls through is good, and then put your bolts in. I recommend getting these top bolts set in there first before doing the bottom ones, because the bottom ones are gonna fight you. You're gonna have to lift the radiator. And I think for torque specs, I'm gonna use the German Gutentight. So as long as they are tight, I think it's gonna be fine. We'll find out. All right, I've got the bolt prepped on the extension with a little bit of anti-seize rust problem, living in a rust area. And I can see through here, I can actually see where I'm trying to line this thing up. And then I'm just gonna basically get it all the way in by hand until I can tell that it's tightening it down. And that's when I'll grab my ratchet. No kidding, every single time I work on my 4Runner, I have a can of surface shield ready. I've got everything buttoned back up here. Just do the whole thing in reverse. Put your fan shroud back on, put your coolant reservoir back on, put the hoses all back on, clip them on, make sure they're ready. If you did your thermostat like I did, make sure that that's all buttoned back up. Now I'm just gonna put good fluid in it and burp it and go through that process. There's great videos for that. I'm not gonna make a video about how to burp it. All right, that is it for this project. I burped the radiator, which was harder than I imagined because it's cold outside, the rain is coming down, and the airflow is so good now that the engine was having a hard time coming up to temp. But I've buttoned it all up. I hope this video is helpful if you're trying to do a radiator swap or cleaning on this 4Runner. Seriously, make this a part of maintenance. Just clean out the radiator. It's so easy to do if you make it a maintenance item. Just take this piece of foam off, If you want to put it back on when you do it, that's fine. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll update you when it's hot outside if this solved my overheating.